Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody. This is Creating the Future's debrief of our participation in BoardSource's 2013 conference, which we're really excited about. With us today are all of our fellows, some of our fellows who were at the conference. If you are watching via the blog post, we would love to know your thoughts as well. Tweet them to the hashtag CTFuture. And just join in the conversation as if you were sitting here with us. I'm Hilda Gottlieb with Creating the Future. Let's just go around.
And I'm Dimitri Petropoulos with Creating the Future.
And Elizabeth, you want to go next?
Elizabeth Badlon, consultant in Los Angeles.
Hey. Gail?
My name's Gail Valeriad. I'm in Guelph, Ontario, Canada, and work with community benefit organizations, particularly boards.
Cool. Tony?
I'm Tony Silbert. I am also a consultant in Los Angeles, California.
And you are not Leah, even though it says so on the screen.
Yes. Sponsored by my wife today.
And Nancy, who are you sponsored by today?
Yeah, exactly. I'm Nancy Iannone, a consultant with Strength Builders in Lake Havasu City, Arizona.
Cool. It is really, really nice to see you guys. It was wonderful to be together in LA with you guys. So we are hoping that Judy Hansen will join us from Calgary. And I know that Bill and Tessa both had other engagements, but what we were looking for was everybody who was at the conference who's one of our fellows to be here. So hopefully Judy will join us soon.
I will be monitoring the tweet stream, so if you are watching and have a comment or a question or want to add to the conversation, just tweet with the hashtag CTFuture, and we'll be able to respond to you.
And let us know you're there. Just say hi.
Yeah, definitely.
Just say hi so we know who's out there, because that's the mystery of Google. We don't know who's out there. Anybody have anything very cool and groovy and awesome that has happened to you since we last saw each other? Which feels like it was like a year ago and feels like it was a day ago. What's been going on in your lives?
This is Elizabeth. My awesome is that I had a great Thanksgiving trip and went to the Northeast from LA during the big storm and miraculously had travel that got us in and out close to schedule, but ended up getting some nasty cold on the way. So continuously reminding myself of what's possible when all my brain cells are not connected. Did a retreat yesterday and another one tomorrow and a big meeting tonight. So this is my little boost of not only hot tea and some vitamin C, but your energy to keep me going with that. So thanks for being here, for the invitation.
So where did you wind up going?
My folks are in upstate New York.
How wonderful.
They're always there for Thanksgiving. It was terrific.
Yay. Who else? What's cooking with you guys?
The Harmony Project, where I'm on the board and now chairman of the board, we had a board retreat on Sunday. On the holiday weekend, we got 80 or 90% of the board to come out, and for a full day of just talking. Wow. as it turned out. So
that's fantastic. Nah. On a holiday weekend?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I felt bad for the people who were the facilitators who actually had to work. Like, you're working on a holiday. At least we're here just for fun.
Wow.
Cool.
Nancy.
Oh, well, I shared this.
I'll pass that ball right over.
Yeah,
I'm good, eh?
Yeah, I like how you do that. I shared this the other day that our Lake Havasu group that meets nonprofit executive director, community benefit executive directors, and board members from various organizations had some discussion about what we mean to our community, and came away from the meeting deciding that they were better together. And that was their takeaway, which is a huge step forward in this community where organizations have been very siloed. So it's something we've been working on for 3 years, but for them to come to that on their own was pretty amazing.
That's wonderful.
Hooray.
So cool.
Before I do my awesome, and then I'm going to focus totally on Gail for her awesome. Lisa Humnick is with us here today, and it's great to have you here, Lisa. Welcome. Also, Judy has indicated that she's here via her hashtag, and I want to remind Judy that if you check your email, you should have a link to be able to join us, because our intent was, as someone who was at the session, we'd love to have your real-time input online. So please go ahead and do that if you were there. So thank you.
Or if you've got the bandwidth to do so.
And my awesome is last week, and this is sort of a weird weather awesome. It's sort of similar to what Elizabeth's was. We were in Vancouver, and when we got to Vancouver, it was beautiful. I mean, the first day we got there, it was actually in Seattle. It was raining, and then we drove up to Vancouver, and then the whole entire week was absolutely gorgeous. It was cool, but it was absolutely gorgeous. And there was snow on the mountains, and we took ferry rides, and it was fantastic.
Sunny and beautiful.
And the awesome part was, I kept on my weather app on my phone kept giving me these storm alert warnings, snow in the mountains for Tucson.
For here.
Yeah.
So the whole time we were gone, there was like horrible weather in Tucson, but in Vancouver it was fantastic. So pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was the only year that Dimitri missing riding in the Tour de Tucson. That was actually an awesome for him, because it was 40 degrees. What is that? 3 degrees centigrade. And
rain
rained the whole time.
Rain the whole time, and pouring rain, not a sprinkle, but pouring rain the whole time. There were people who were like from Chicago riding in it that was too cold for them, and they dropped out. I mean, it was just, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
so one of Dimitri's awesomes was, yes, I wasn't there. I was in Vancouver instead. It was sunny and nice.
Wow.
So Gail, you've had a moment to think. What's going on?
Well, it gets boring saying the same ones over and over again, so I don't want to do that. But because this is the second hangout I've been part of this week, and I've also facilitated a couple of sessions where I've also talked about awesomeness. And so I guess I want to reflect on one of those sessions with a group of volunteer managers, and listening to one individual describe how her organization went beyond what the traditional approach to engaging volunteers would look like, on the basis of a lot of conversation and dialogue among the group about how to be more responsive to people in the community, so that they're not using volunteers, they're welcoming them as part of their family. So she told the story of a man who was a long-term volunteer in their program, who this is a theater that is completely run by volunteers. And so he's been an usher for years and years, and is no longer physically able to navigate up and down the steps. So they created an honorary position for him, because they felt that he was so much a part of their family that they didn't want to say goodbye to him. So they figured out how to make a position that would fit his skills and interests. And he's thrilled about it, and they're thrilled because they still get to have him as part of the organization. And they have realized that this is really what it was all about all along, and now they're really getting excited about the possibility of inventing positions and seeing what that looks like when they live way outside the box of what they've traditionally done.
Wow.
Wow. That's
Neat.
cool.
I told that story particularly for Lisa.
Yeah, really. I would love to know more about that afterwards and connect up with them, Gail, because of the work that we're trying to do with meeting people with their gifts rather than quote-unquote our needs.
Yep.
So if we can connect up with that afterwards, I would love to know more about that.
Sure.
Very, very cool. And I see Judy is here. Judy, can you hear us?
You may be muted, Judy. So
You probably came on muted, so hopefully we'll find the key to unmute.
And Justin is joining us.
Justin is here.
He's voyeuring.
Yes, it's not voyeuring if you're on the Twitter and telling us you're voyeuring. Hi, I'm peeping through your window. Let's chat about it. Judy, do you have sound? Have you found the magic button? Okay. You have the chat window up. Maybe that's where we can. If you hover over the video, the main screen on the video, you'll see a bunch of settings come up, and one of them should be a red microphone that you can unclick.
Okay, click it again.
Can you text some stuff into the chat box, and we'll figure out what the problem is, and if worst comes to worst, Dimitri can walk you through it on his cell phone.
It should be unmuted now, as a little microphone went off.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see if it is.
What I'm going to do is
See if you can call her.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to text her in the chat box.
Cool. Let's see. Dimitri will handle that while I'm sharing my awesomes. It's, we mentioned the other day when we were in the faculty development meeting that it's hard when there's 9 million awesomes a day. We had an amazing time in Vancouver exploring a possible demonstration project, meeting with potential partners. It was off the charts in addition to being a beautiful, beautiful place. But the thing that I shared the other day and that I've been really thinking about probably the most these days about anything is what's going on with my mom and the fact that at age 90 she is suddenly ill. She was great and healthy and phenomenal for 88.5 years, 89 years, and is suddenly pretty severely debilitated from ALS. And what I'm realizing is how fortunate I am for this work and this community. That I know you guys have all mentioned at various times throughout the stuff that you guys all go through, how powerful these frameworks are for our own lives. And when I think about the question of what will bring out the best in my mom at every day and in every part of the circumstances from moving to assisted living to everything else, it just totally reframes everything and it makes it all aiming towards what's possible, even as she's thinking about, her final months and maybe here. And so it's just been an incredible gift, and I never really thought that it would feel like this. It's massively awesome in many, many, many ways. Yeah.
Gail, Lisa loved it. Thank you.
Loved your
story. Thank you.
I'm glad.
Rebecca has joined us.
Rebecca Hurd is here. Hello.
Hi, Rebecca. Great to see you as well, or see your little egg-shaped icon there.
We'll have to get you a real Twitter avatar so we can see your amazingly smiling. So, yeah. One of the things that we talked about actually during our session is starting every meeting touching base with each other. And so we weren't kidding. This is what we do. We start every meeting touching base with what's been going on with each other, and sometimes it's professional, and sometimes it's personal, and sometimes it's both. So, so let's dive in here. You guys were all at the BoardSource conference. It was fabulous to be able to be with you, and we've got about another hour and 15 minutes or so to just sort of debrief what went well, what could we do better, how did we achieve the outcomes, did we even grab half of the outcomes that we thought would come out of this, and what did this make possible. When we were preparing for this, we went through the list that you guys can see in front of you, and for those of you who are watching in the post, there is a link to the list of our outcomes that we had wanted as we were preparing for this. We asked the question, what do we want Creating the Future's participation in the BoardSource conference to make possible, and for whom? And the for whoms that we talked about were for the attendees, whether it was to the conference overall or to our workshop, to our fellows, all of us, to fellows who did not attend, sort of the, what did you bring me? BoardSource needs a T-shirt that says, I went to the BoardSource conference and all I got was this lousy T-shirt. My mom went to the BoardSource conference. For BoardSource itself and for creating the future's mission. So as you guys look at this, I'll just open it up to you guys. How did we do on meeting objectives? And whoever is most excited about one of these, chime in and we'll just, play with that. Whether it is, do you want to start with you guys? Do you want to start with, what did it make possible for you? Let's do that. What did it make possible for you guys as fellows who attended? And as you look at the list that we have in front of us, how did we do? How did we all collectively do on that? And let's just go from there.
Well, I'll start. And by the way, I have to leave in about 30 minutes. I'm sorry, I had a meeting come out of nowhere. But I felt like for me, being with the group, and it was really the first time I was with more than two others from the group, to be together in a large group within that context made it feel, I don't know, much more real and like, oh, now we have a gang and we can do so. It was the first time for me, and I've not been part of these online hangouts, but for me, so this is really my first time connecting. It felt like, oh yeah, we are a posse. We do have power as a group, and it was great to. It was very fun to sort of be in a conference where you have people who you can talk to and relate to in this way, and so I felt like for me it felt very empowering. I felt like as a group. There was not a presence. It didn't feel like it was enough. We weren't a presence in the conference. We had our session, but I almost wonder if we should have had one of the booths out front. If that was a way to have more of a ubiquitous to be a presence there, because otherwise you're sort of 1 out of 8 sessions happening out of 8 different session times, and then you're drinking and eating hors d'oeuvres and sitting in it's just hard. It's hard to it's a big thing, and how are you not just a speck in it? But for me personally, I felt like our ability to transcend speckness to become much a larger, maybe a dot or a blob or even an entire stain on the whole thing we could do. I felt that potential.
Transcend speckness to become a blob.
I love it.
Dot or blob. So I want to point out that.
Yeah, I know, but the fun part. How about the rest of you riffing off of that? Tony, you're always such a tough act to follow.
I love being able to meet in person people that I've been following online, and to be able to have the time together, both when we set aside the time for ourselves, which was a great compliment to going to the conference, and also in sessions and then after sessions, so that we could debrief with common language and perspective. As an independent consultant, for me, going to conferences can be, just one person, and I might know people professionally, but not really well, and certainly not, once or twice I've gone to conferences with people I've worked with closely. But this was a mini posse, a mini blog, and a chance to be able to, cross paths and be able to share ideas and thinking, to be able to build on what we heard in the sessions, relate it to our worldview and way of working, and to be able to apply that, I think really helped me be able to pull some of this stuff out. Mm-hmm. And it had a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. What did it feel like came out of that for you guys? What did it make possible, all of you guys being together and sharing that experience? What did it feel like was moving?
Well, for me, what came out of the experience was, in addition to what I've heard everybody or the others say about the feeling of community that among all of us that came when we came together, that was amazing. But also what came out of it was taking the time to participate in the presentation meant that it's led to another conversation among colleagues locally about some of the lessons learned and what does it mean to be extremely transparent. I've had a lot of people ask me, what did you mean by that, and can you talk with me more? I'd really like to learn more. So even participating in the conference in any way opened the door for me to have that discussion locally, and that has been brilliant.
Wow. Judy, are you there?
I'm here, but it's still muted.
No, you're not. No, we hear you.
Oh, okay.
Hooray, 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 hooray.
I also want to say hi to Kent. Hi, Kent.
Hello,
Hey,
Kent.
Kent.
Oh, it's wonderful to see you. And I would encourage, Kent, you were at least at our gathering when we all got together. If you can sort of focus on what that felt like, what it made possible for you, just as we're debriefing here, what the value was to our fellows who attended. Judy, what we're looking at is the sheet that was in the link that Dimitri sent you, that sheet, and we're talking really about what it made possible for our fellows, both meeting separately that first night, all of us, and then as everybody interacted as part of the sessions.
Also, Judy, would you introduce yourself?
Please. Oh, you're muted again.
You're muted again. I think you need to keep the headset on.
Yep.
That worked fine when you had it plugged in.
Maybe not. So close.
So close.
That's frustrating.
The lesson here is when it works, don't move. Don't change anything. Don't so much as swivel in our seats. I'll just keep trying, and when we can hear you, we'll all jump up and down. Don't be afraid of interrupting anything. If you guys look at the sheet of things that we had as sort of goals and objectives for our fellows during the session, we said that we were hoping for linkages with others who are seeking new ways of being, gathering to further our own conversations, enhancing our existing community, the joy of just being together, fellows seeing ways to participate in other conferences, and the power of inviting the question. Our session is about inviting the question, not having the answer. How do you guys feel about all of those? Obviously, we talked about the ones about the joy of our being together, but linkages with other people who are exploring new ways of being and all the rest of those. How did you guys feel we did on that?
I had great opportunities to have conversations with people, two of whom joined the Facebook group, and just I found that it's really interesting when you're wearing a speaker ribbon on your badge. People either don't make eye contact because they're not sure whether they should talk to you, or it's a wonderful opportunity because they'll say, "Oh, what's your session about?" And so it was a great opportunity in lots of little ways. And honestly, most of those conversations took place. Some of them were at the cocktail party, but it was also in the morning eating breakfast and just sitting on a bench next to somebody and talking about, where they were from and what we were doing, or right before a session started. And there were follow-up conversations after our session with people that I sat next to in sessions the next day. So I felt like I had good opportunities to link with people who were curious or who were still thinking about what we discussed the day before, and we're still processing it.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that goal of creating linkages both personally and on behalf of creating the future I felt was successful.
Mm-hmm. I've continued to have a conversation with one of the people who approached us at the end to ask some questions. Now it has been a couple of weeks since we corresponded, but the conversation kept going, which was nice.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's then lead right into the session itself. How did you guys feel in terms of what we accomplished? What would you say, without the cheat sheet, what would you say that session accomplished for the people that were in the room?
Well, the way it came off, I think, at least in my perspective and at my table, it was kind of like, hey, we're doing this experiment, and you know, you might want to think about experimenting with it too. And you know, the kind of like the bench research, the theoretical underpinnings of the experiment are sound, but we don't yet necessarily have convincing results that are going to make you want to invest what you need to do that experiment yourself. So I think everyone was willing to entertain it, but to get past the fear of actually doing it, they needed more compelling evidence that it could be successful, and just having them ask the question, I think many were very quick to answer that question in their mind, you know, about what it would be in a way that would probably make them not pursue it further without more engagement. Does that make sense?
A little bit.
A little bit. All right. More than I usually get.
Well, no, I'm curious about the part about more engagement, because the thing that popped for a lot of people was the fear and resistance of having more open participation. Mm-hmm. But the other part that popped, I'm hearing like two different things in there: the value of asking the question, the need for more evidence, and the need for more engagement. And it was the more engagement part that and any of you jump in.
Well, what I meant by that was just there needed to be some follow-up to get those people, capture them, get them on a mailing list, so they can see how the perspective and how things play out more than just in this 1.5 hour conversation. They were tickled, but they weren't going to go for it unless something came back and touched them again.
Mm-hmm. Agreed on that.
Mm-hmm.
It needed to be part of a continuum and not a one-time event. I also, though, did like hearing what you said about the soundness of the framework. That it does seem sound. You know, we're in a laboratory trying to create repeatable results, and it does feel like that. But it doesn't feel like we're, you know, attempting to levitate by just thinking about it. So there is, you know, a basis there.
Mm-hmm.
This is the silent Judy speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, don't
Keep going.
I'm leaving the headphones on. This is Judy from Canada. It's 3 below Fahrenheit here today. It's rather chilly. So this is nice to be on something indoors. I also think that the perspective of the Creating the Future presentation has to be taken with the whole conference in your mind. I think people went home from many different talks with new ideas and new concepts in their minds, and it needs to percolate. Mm-hmm. Whether it's this presentation or a different one that was down the road. Yeah. And so people left being overwhelmed. So I while there was some disappointment that we didn't get to do a try it kind of a piece, the room was full, people were silent, people were listening, and that was important.
Yeah, one of the things that you had pointed out, Judy, and I appreciated when you did, is that the room was full and nobody left.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were clearly, as you said, Tony, they were clearly engaged, and you could smell the workings of their brains burning. It was clearly getting people thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was living in the middle of the spectrum. It was almost a physical manifestation of the whole where people are in their openness and way of thinking, and whether it's at the table I sat at or in the conversations that we had as a full group with people, some just so integrating the thinking into the way they are and work, and others trickling up about all kinds of problems that could never work and really skeptical, which I found a lot at the conference. There was a lot of prickliness that I found. And I think that going to a big national conference, going from session to session, we have these expectations of what that 90 minutes will be like. And from the very beginning, we modeled that this is different. Mm-hmm. And that's enough to make some people super excited, and some people just a little off kilter and they might get there, and some people just like completely lost. And then the percolating that you talked about, Judy, I think will get, they'll land somewhere. Wherever they land, they land. But it was a different experience. I think it was notable for those who were there for different reasons, but it was definitely different from what else was going on. Mm-hmm.
One of the bones I have to pick with BoardSource is that I don't think they allowed other authors to sell their pieces, their books. And so people couldn't have picked up Hildy's book there.
At their table, at the BoardSource library?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I hadn't even thought about it.
Yeah, just make it part of their library.
Put it in their library, yeah. I think you're right, Judy. I think they only sell BoardSource stuff.
Yeah, that bugged me. I put that in my comments.
Yeah, well, I do honor the fact that BoardSource opened the conference to other in-house presentations, and basically created the environment that allowed this to come to pass. And so I think that was a progressive thing on their part to be looking at how do we push the envelope, even though this is what we do. There's things outside of what we do.
And there is a really fine line, and I totally get it, because we're having that conversation with James right now about somebody that wants us to help craft a conference. And one of the concerns is speakers who show up just to push their books, push their consulting. And I totally understand that fine line, and the fact, I mean, there's ways around it, but coming back, and I appreciate, Judy, the okay, what do I do next for the people like you were saying, Elizabeth, who are ready to oh wow, okay, this would be cool, let me think about it more. It also didn't help. A part of what was frustrating was not having the handouts right there. Tessa had mentioned in her comment at the blog post how helpful it would have been for people to have the handouts in their hands right there, to scribble on them, and that was sort of our assumption, was that they would at least have access to them at that point.
I do think, though, that that's somewhat a function of, so often the handouts are nothing more than the PowerPoint presentation.
Right.
And I don't think we ever do handouts that are part of the PowerPoint, part of whatever. I mean, the handouts are usually supplemental or complementary or another thing entirely that builds on it. So it may be just a lack of experience in that. I also think from talking to them that there's a possibility that it was just one of those things that didn't happen. That yes,
logistical thing.
Logistical thing. It just didn't happen in time, and so we'll just do it afterwards. I don't know.
Let's. I want to focus back on the question of what do you guys think the presentation itself made possible for the attendees?
I think it made it possible for them to ask their own questions. I recall hearing
Well, I think
people.
it made it.
Sorry, Tony. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
I think I heard people asking the question, or responding to the question, what would your board say, or could you ask this question of your board? And I saw a lot of nodding, and yeah, we should really do that. That would be a good conversation to have. So I'd like to say that, or think that what it made possible was a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm. Even just the idea that a different way of having a board meeting was even possible. You know, I think a lot of people just sort of take it. That's one of the things you're sort of handed is like, oh, this is this framework for doing this part of this gig, and just even being able to ask that question. I had a woman at my table though. She worked for some sort of public agency. All of her board meetings were broadcast on, were open to public and broadcast on public access TV. And so she already had very solid ideas about it. That in some senses she had been running the experiment in a certain way longer, and so she sort of tainted the openness of the group in a certain way, I think.
And there's a fine line between transparency and openness, which goes to transparency is the world can see, but they can't walk in, they can't participate.
Right.
In some cases, I think that was it was interesting to see that was the place, because we were so focused on the participation part, that I loved the question, and I wish I could remember the gal's name, and I loved your answer to it, Elizabeth. There was one gal that said they've got so many people who feel so engaged, how could they possibly allow all those people to participate in their leadership and their decision making? And Elizabeth, your response being, oh my God, to have that problem is so powerful. Right. What a wonderful problem to be able to work through. What does it take to let those people feel engaged?
I think another thing that happened during the presentation was that people got to experience your modeling of the starfish. And to be able to see how the four of you interacted and presented, and brought in different perspectives, and shared that one of the themes that came out for me from the conference was, if you want to change the dance, you have to change the music. And by asking the question and modeling that you can have board meetings that are engaged and people show up, and it's not just board members and you love it, and all the positives about board, that's the music change that I think we all do so much. That I heard the older tune in so many of the other sessions of, boards are bad and awful and hard and terrible and yeah. We modeled something very different there, and it wasn't isolated to the Creating the Future board because you brought in examples from other places, and having fellows there brought in examples from other places.
Right, yeah.
And I don't think that can be underplayed, underestimated. The value of having that voice among all the other voices in a conference that large.
Yeah. I walked away feeling like, even for the people who were pushing back and feeling some fear and resistance about this, that probably there were very few people in that room who weren't going to walk into their next board meeting with that in the back of their mind. If it did nothing else but have them look a little bit differently at what they're doing in their own board, it opened the door a crack for them to think about how things might be different and start that conversation.
Yeah, it was it was interesting in two thoughts that are coming up for me. It was interesting to see every time people asked a question about, well, what would that look like? What would you do if? What about a board that? The fact that consistently the four of us kept coming back to, this is a conversation to have with your board.
Yeah.
To be modeling again that it's not about us having an answer, but encouraging you to have the question. And it was fun to watch after a while, people going, oh yeah. I had one person say during one of the table conversations where I was listening, I heard one person say, you know, this actually is modeling the generative conversations that BoardSource keeps telling us we should have.
Right.
And so I very much appreciated that, just in terms of our constantly handing it back to them and saying, we don't have an answer to that. This is, you know, your board needs to answer this. How would your board answer it if you asked them that question? There's a generative conversation that you could have. So the power of the question versus the power of the expert at the front of the room having the answer, I found, and I heard from people that was a piece that was bending their brains, because as several of you noted, that's not what the other sessions were doing. We just kept handing it back to them, saying, we're not pretending to be the expert. You guys are the expert. How do you bring up that question?
And that it was a team answer. I mean, you know, that there were other sessions that had multiple presenters where they were multiple experts. And not that this wasn't an expert session, but the presenters were, as a team, turning it back over to the participants. And I think that set a very different tone in terms of how people perceive this.
Yeah, and one of the things that I found really interesting, and you mentioned it, Elizabeth, is that whole issue of board work being hard. And I don't know that there was any session that I attended where, even some of the most inspirational sessions, where the presenter didn't note, this will be hard. And the fact that if we tell people it's going to be hard, they'll think it's hard. I'm curious if that was a piece of what the rest of you heard as well, because you mentioned it, Elizabeth, and I noticed it as well.
It's hard was everywhere. We kept hearing it over and over again. This is all so difficult. It's such a challenge. I think too that was a steady diet for 2 whole days.
Well, that's kind of the premise of the whole thing, isn't it? This is so hard. We all have to come across the country to figure it out together. You know.
Well, I think the way we've traditionally done governance, we've made it as complicated as we humanly can. So we've made it hard because it's not something anybody really joyfully embraces and wants to do.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
I am mindful of the fact that several of you need to leave at the top of the hour. As you look through this list of what we wanted to accomplish, what else? Because I know that it helped further Creating the Future's mission hugely. But I'm curious if there's anything else that jumps out at you in a debrief. What would you hope that we would accomplish at whether it's future BoardSource conferences or attending future conferences, period?
I think it was great.
And I know Gail had several conversations. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah, no, just I'm thinking about that conversation I had. We talked later about what could we do as fellows at other conferences, and so I really like the idea of following up and sharing what conferences we go to. It really is very inviting to me to think about going to conferences, little pods, and to be able to replicate this in some way. And in thinking about it, I think that the workshop position helps tremendously to be able to spread the ripples. And I know that I would also have a lot of benefit if there were some group of us at a conference, even if we didn't have a workshop position.
given that we noticed how productive and generative it was to be the organization asking questions and actually facilitating dialogue in our workshop, I think there's real value in that, knowing especially that we've just said so often the conversation tends to be more top-down, expert-driven, problem-oriented. So it's a nice alternative that Creating the Future can offer in any setting where we find ourselves.
What else stood out for you guys?
Well, can I just ask, does it make sense if I want to go back, and this is just the mundane point of being set up in one of those booths up front, like an insurance company or a accounting firm, or I'm not even sure who they're, and I didn't stop at any of them, but you know, if
maybe that's the answer.
Which have gotten you.
I was just afraid, you know. I mean, I have all the Bhagavad Gitas I need. I don't need any more, you know, materials handed to me. But I don't know. Is that something that makes sense, or would that be bad? Is it expensive? I have no idea. But if you imagine the
I think it really comes down to, for each conference, deciding what we want to accomplish and what would be the tools with which to accomplish that. Sometimes it could be a booth. Gail, you and Karen had an interesting experience in Ontario representing Creating the Future at a booth. Sometimes it could be a booth, sometimes it could not be, and I think it depends. And I think it depends on the extent to which people like you say you have enough pens.
It's just one of that thing of getting the presence.
You know, what that brings to mind to me is the idea of partnership with the event organizers.
Yeah.
Because you know, it may mean a booth, but a booth is generally a vendor of some sort. Yeah. Right. And I guess we're a vendor of an idea as much as anything else. But and this is to BoardSource, I think as they are open to having these kinds of opportunities presented, meaning other folks other than BoardSource presenting, doing it in a less competitive and more partnership way, as opposed to here's the RFP, you passed, here are our rules.
Well, it's transactional.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying is I think that if it was more partnership, that would potentially address some of what you're talking about there.
Is there anybody from BoardSource participating in this discussion right now, like even on Twitter?
So far, no, but we don't know who is watching. So if you're watching from BoardSource, say hello. We certainly invited them. Kent was wondering about our session. At the start, were folks invited to suspend common assumptions to imagine a different way to govern? What would your answers be?
Good question.
Were people asked to suspend common assumptions to imagine a different way to govern?
Not in so many words.
Right.
And it's not a bad idea that maybe it should have been framed at the beginning like that. I think there was a good bit of time of people trying to really grasp what was going on for a while. Like, what exactly are we really talking about? And that might have been a good way to open it up and have them be open to what it was.
Yeah. Go.
I think we spin this so much that's one of those stepping back and thinking from the audience perspective, and really starting with important framing, like what you were offering, Kent, and what's different about this and what we're aiming for. I also just, Tony, your question about the booth and our ideas about partnership, I connected back to, I think, Gail, you were saying how we were the people inviting conversation. It started in my head a visualization of a booth at the conference that looked very much not like a vendor booth, so Tony, you wouldn't be afraid of the pen vendors, but it was more a conversation corner, and that it would be a chance to model who we are and what we do. And I was at a conference right after BoardSource where it was a client and they're an association, and we decided to put up a board where people could post questions about the future and then have conversations with board members. So the board members were hanging out at the booth and just engaged people. And at first people were like, what's going on here? And are you giving out Post-it notes? It's like, don't take my Post-it notes, I need those. But then they got into conversation and they posted things, they read what other people wrote. And so it was a different feel. And another vendor there is an education group, actually rented armchairs and brought in a big carpet and had a low coffee table with snacks on it and invited people to come in and sit and talk with them. And it really looked different from all those other tables. And those might be ideas that we might be able to work on in the future.
Yeah, the thing that was making me laugh as you were talking, Elizabeth, was the thought that we won't give out pens, we'll give out questions.
Yeah, exactly.
What were the responses from BoardSource's survey? You know, there was the at the table paper survey at the end. Did you get any responses from that, and how did that compare to other speakers and what their responses were?
I haven't gotten anything. Gail and Nancy, have you gotten anything?
No, we're supposed to. They said they were compiling it.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Hopefully it'll be timely.
Yeah, one of the things that stood out for me, there were a couple of things that stood out for me. One, Gail, Elizabeth, you guys have mentioned, and it was actually quite overwhelming to me at an emotional level, the degree to which everybody was talking about how hard it was. That I found. I found in the most inspirational sessions that was the debilitating part. That once you told people it was hard, they were no longer inspired. So I found that at a personal level was really triggered for me. But I think it's once you're aware of language that you realize the power of language, and for the most part we don't realize we're doing something until somebody points it out. So the fact that so much of our work is about language is why probably most of us noticed it. Another huge standout for me was the thought, and several of you alluded to it, of how cool it would be to do a conference that's not any one person's conference or any one organization's conference, to bring together a group of like-kind organizations, have it be a joint conference in every sense of the word, jointly figured out, joint objectives, jointly invited, joint sharing of revenues and credit and et cetera. It just seems to me that the what we can accomplish together versus on our own just seems immensely powerful and exciting to me.
My God, you could blow things up entirely.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Mm.
Yeah, it takes it out of this is a revenue generator and puts it into this is something we really want to do. This is the change we really want to create, as opposed to, this is our annual $20,000.
Well, and that is what it becomes a revenue source. What frequently happens.
Yeah.
And Tony, we acknowledge that you need to leave, and we will miss you.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. What generally happens with conferences is they start out as mission, and they become a revenue source, and then they become then organizations become dependent on them. They don't usually start out as the revenue source. They usually start out with all good intention, and then, oh shit, what are we going to do if we don't have that $50,000 in the bank? And so it morphs. And maybe one of the ways to stop it from morphing is that it's everybody together, constantly holding each other accountable for the whole, or maybe it just becomes that naturally. Maybe that's the way humans go. I don't know. Maybe then all 5 groups are saying, "Oh shit! What if we don't get our $20,000?" But that was another thought that occurred to me.
Well, if you located the impact in the participants coming, and what you wanted them to walk away knowing, being, etc., that's different, you're going to have a much different outcome than it being about you and whether or not you make money at it, whether you're selling something.
If you're sticking really, really hard to outcomes.
Yeah.
If you're really focusing on the impact on the outcomes and on opening the doors to a different way of thinking and thinking that through from how people really learn. Because there's a lot of push at conferences, and a lot of here's the information, and the old, if you get two tips and tricks out of this, we will feel like we did our shtick, and that doesn't move the needle any.
Mm-hmm.
So
you really have to think it through. If you want serious impact, if you say that, when they all come back together again next year, this is what we want to hear them reporting. This is what we know we want to see and hear and feel.
Oh, yeah.
Then, you're designing it for the long term as opposed to just what they do in this, 2 days that they're together. You're going to do things completely differently. That's inevitable.
Even if the evaluations, yes, you get the smile sheets at the end of the session, but if the evaluations also then happened a month later and then 3 months later, to see if there's any change happening, we just did that with our immersion class for the first time. We did not give them, just as an experiment, we didn't give them the evaluation when they left. We gave it to them 6 weeks after to see what the comments are. So I mean, it's just I don't know that it fixes anything, but it's.
I also like the idea of walking the talk booth, the kissing booth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That it's not you're not selling anything. You're just you're showing the power of conversation in the fact that you have this booth. I mean, it's just conversation that's going on around questions and issues. I mean, that is a really, really different thing. I mean, I was thinking about that the Center for Nonprofit Management had a booth there. I was glad to see them there. I was glad to see an organization there that wasn't an insurance provider.
The Center for Nonprofit Management is a really good example because it is sort of a like-kind organization rather than selling insurance. The ability to engage, and one thing I did find at that particular booth, there were always people hanging out. So maybe it would be worth finding out what they were doing there, because they're the only ones that I knew by name. So obviously I didn't remember any of the others. That says something about the booths. But there were.
It is building on a partnership because they're building a partnership. I don't know what the terms of having that booth, but BoardSource and Nonprofit are working together. So it is a first step toward what you're visualizing.
I think you're right. Nancy, you had something.
Well, just building on when Elizabeth brought up her idea, I had been thinking something similar about building on that. What if the board discussion that we had intended to present, what if that kind of discussion was happening in that living room space amongst 2 or 3 or 4 people from Creating the Future that people could be invited to sit in on, be a part of, observe? I mean, there's lots of ways when we're talking about engagement, which all ties this whole discussion ties in with an outcome I hadn't anticipated, which was the huge amount of energy for our own community around, wow, what does this make possible when we come together around a conference? And all of the ideas that have started popping from then, that wasn't one I had anticipated.
Yep. You know what you're raising for me, Nancy, is one of the hiccups as we were planning was we had planned to do a demonstration. And in the 90 minutes, there was so much need for more groundwork that we sort of went through anticipating there'd be 10 minutes of discussion on this and 15 minutes of discussion on this, and then we'll do a presentation. What if there's no demonstration, and the demonstration is happening on an ongoing basis in a booth?
Right.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And we could even schedule it at 1 o'clock, at 3 o'clock, at 5 o'clock. We'll be doing da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then you've got the time to really, because I think that's part of what happened in the session itself, was the fact that it didn't go the way that we anticipated for several reasons. We started late. We started by scrambling for handouts. So we knocked 10 minutes off of that. and then went, oh my God, we had planned on a demonstration. Where do we take the conversation? And that's when the four of us just sort of handed it off to each other.
Right down to a tech issue where the cable had been stepped on, and we had to replace, that projector wouldn't work because the cable, they had to get a new cable. So there's some time eaten up at the beginning from that as well.
So I think the thought of the demonstration happens in an ongoing way at a booth. I think that's brilliant. I think it's brilliant. I know you have to leave, Gail. Are there thoughts and reflections that? Oh, we missed Gail entirely.
So
that was the end. I want us to be mindful of time, and I know that several. Are you able to stick around for a little bit, or Elizabeth, did you have to go as well?
Yeah, I have to go too.
Okay, then why don't I just ask one final reflection? Is there anything that we should have talked about today that we did not, that we can add into the blog post to make for more conversation? And anybody that's watching, please tweet that in as well.
I would be interested in any reflections from people that were in attendance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah, that would have been real helpful. Nancy, Elizabeth, anything jumping out for you that we haven't already talked about?
Not for me.
No, I like these ideas.
I think they're great ideas, and the thing that's jumping out at me is we really accomplished so much of what we set out to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And for a very, very first workshop on this subject, I mean, hell, we haven't even been doing this for that long. Right. We're actually doing a workshop on it. But for a very, very first workshop and for our first attendance en masse at a conference, I think we did pretty well.
Very effective. I can't wait to see where this goes. I'd love to incorporate the feedback that we might ultimately get on this into our thinking for the next round, whatever that and wherever that is.
Yeah, I feel like it moved my thinking forward in a million different ways. Being there, being present, being with each other, being with others, learning from others. Yeah, it did everything. So, yeah. Well, if anybody has any other thoughts, please either post them as a comment at the blog. We'll keep the conversation going there, or tweet them to the hashtag #CTFuture. And we are just really, really grateful that you guys were all here, and especially to Kent and to Rebecca, to Lisa, to Justin. Thank you for chiming in, and to anybody else.
And anybody else.
Anybody else that was out there watching. And thank you, all of you, and it's always nice to see your faces.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Fred.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.